Welcome to this episode of Solved, plucked from deep in our archives. You may not realize we've actually been doing this show since way before it was called Solved and started being posted to YouTube. So this is good stuff. You can help support us by becoming a member. Members get an extended version of Solved before YouTube, as well as ad-free versions of the Best of Left podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts. So sign up at bestofleft.com/support. And now, enjoy this throwback edition of Solved. Welcome to Solved. That's all caps with an exclamation point. We're here to solve the world's problems because if we don't, someone dumber will. My name is Jay, and our resident solvers are Amanda, Deon, and Erin, who will likely offer a greeting now.
Hey there.
Hello.
How's it going?
Speaking of dumb people with bad ideas, that is what we're going to be covering today. And not just run-of-the-mill bad ideas, the ones that start kind of small but end in genocide. First, though, we have been encouraging listener feedback, comments, and questions. And Amanda has one from last week that we got.
Yeah, and just a quick warning, there is some strong language here, so give yourself a second before you listen ahead. So our listener writes, just listen to the members only podcast. I'm happy that there are those who can talk to MAGA people. I'm doing my best, but frankly angry at being told to reach out to MAGA. I had one man tell me that he looked forward to the day when it would be legal to hunt and kill worthless women like me. I actually thought I had made the scenario up until a friend of my partner was told the same thing. I have been threatened with physical violence by a Trump supporter for wearing a mask. I have stopped/reduced how often I shop in a store because white men have decided that they can repeatedly block me in an aisle while looming over me with a shit-eating grin. I cannot decide which emotion is stronger, fear or anger. I think it may be fear, honestly. I have no desire to reach across the aisle. Quite frankly, these assholes prove that Clinton was right. They are deplorable. I am tired of spending my time trying to please people who cannot be pleased. And first of all, I want to thank our listener for sending that in and for sharing their experiences. And I'm very sorry that you have experienced these things and you are not alone and you didn't make it up. And I'm sure this is happening all over the place. I know this is happening all over the place. And I guess, all I wanted to say here is, I think that this was in response to a brief conversation in the last show where Erin was expressing similar feelings of this thing that's in the ether that is like, well, people need to talk to MAGA supporters because how will we ever move forward? And there's a lot of gray area and nuance within a statement like that. I think we should just clarify, at least from our perspective, that we would never encourage anyone to talk to someone who they feel uncomfortable with or who is aggressive or violent or threatening in any way. The people we are often talking about is like the, newer Trump voters, somebody who maybe voted for Biden in 2020, but now has, switched over to Trump to just try something new. There's a decent amount of people like that. And those are more of the reachable people. But, hey, some of them might be awful. And so don't even bother is how I would say it. So I just wanted to clarify that from our perspective, we are certainly not on board with telling people to go reach out to aggressive, violent, scary people. They got their own healing to do, for sure.
Definitely. And I mean, definitely empathize with a lot of the feelings, especially when you look towards our Democratic legislators and you see a lot of people who are placating a lot of both sides. You have the Amy Klobuchars out here just making statements that make it really hard for people who are living the daily life. But I will say, I do feel like at the podcast, we're trying to examine some of the ways that people give way to this violent rhetoric, this violent behavior. It's like a historical study through time where these are connection points that you see in different regimes in different countries, especially when you see fascism on the rise. So while we would never advocate for working with fascists, that feels like a full stop, especially for me. But as far as demographically, there are some people who voted for Trump that also believe trans people have a right to exist, that believe in, equality and things like that. But I'm really sorry for that listener's experience because that day-to-day fear, that it's pretty paralyzing. So any feelings that come from that, completely valid. And yeah, like, it's dangerous.
Deon, you have any advice for how women should deal with men they feel uncomfortable with?
I absolutely do not.
Excellent.
Whatever you're feeling is probably accurate.
Mhm.
All right, then. Back to the topic of the day, dumb people with bad ideas. To start, though, as we always should, I want to define terms because dumbness can come in many forms. People can be dumb because they're unintelligent, but I'm sort of expanding that definition in like a slightly snarky way to include people who have probably a reasonable amount of intelligence and capacity for logic, but misuse it in ways that leads them to act extremely illogically, or as we might say, dumbly. Is dumbly a word? That's a bad way to start a
Uh-oh.
conversation.
Yeah,
Huh?
that's not a good.
Ooh. So my favorite example comes from real life. I had this real experience with an actual human that I used to know. This guy was an extremely nice, very Christian person who sort of enjoyed sparring with me and my friends about religion because we were not religious. He was 40 years older than us at the time. And so we would have these fun conversations. And we got talking about evolution. This guy, Ralph, he did not believe in evolution. And because we talked with him long enough about it, he explained why. He's like, look, the scientists are trying to convince me that there, way back in the day, there were giraffes who couldn't reach the leaves on the trees. And so they decided to grow their necks longer. And that's ridiculous. You are not going to convince me that a giraffe is capable of deciding to grow their neck longer. And if that's how evolution works, well, then it's a non-starter. Like, it's ridiculous. And that has stuck in my head ever since because everything he said is logical. It actually does make sense based on his faulty premise for him to follow the chain of logic as he did and come to the conclusion that he did. But so often people start with maybe just a small misconception or a small bit of faulty premise, and there is no telling where that can end. And so when people fall into that trap, or particularly when they consistently think in ways that start with their philosophy, their ideology, some deeply held belief that is not supported by evidence, the likelihood that they are going to build a set of logic on top of that that makes internal sense while still being profoundly wrong goes up and up and up with time and with all of the instances when they would do something like that. So JD Vance, he figures prominently into this discussion, and he is one of these people. He is not a dumb person because he is incapable of intelligence. He is dumb because he has a lot of assumptions that are built on profoundly incorrect premises. And so, I guess we have no choice but to just continue to expose, rip to shreds these sorts of bad ideas so that as few people as possible fall into similar traps. Does anyone have any thoughts on general dumbness before we dive into the topic at hand?
There's a bunch of self-help gurus that always say, like, making change, you just make a small degree of change, and over time it becomes this giant thing. Like what you were describing is like if you're sailing a ship and you go 1 degree west, if you go 2 feet, it's not that big deal. If you go 2,000 miles, you're on a whole different course. And I feel like that's where we are as a country. We're really all starting from not that different of places, but we have gone over this for so long that we are now so far apart based on this tiny disagreement in a lot of cases. Now, based on the conversation we had earlier about what the caller said, there are some people who started at a different place and will never come back.
Yeah.
But we just keep getting further and further apart. The people who are capable of reasoning and logic, we're continuing to go in different directions. And at some point, we've got to help them get course corrected back at some point, and not expect them to be back on our side at any time soon, but maybe in the future.
I also feel like this is kind of the trend of what we've been talking about, of shared experiences or shared realities. Like it feels like because we're now so off course that like even the realities are different. So it's hard convincing someone that like they're even starting on that faulty premise. And I think that's why we have people that we think are really dumb because of that. Like they're not even in the shared reality that like we used to have as, I don't know, people, as country, whatever we want to say. So yeah, I'm all for us solving this one, if you will.
Yeah.
Nice.
You just made me think about, and I think we've talked about this many times, if the right had been correct that the 2020 election had been stolen, then their actions might have been justified, right? But since none of what they believed was actually true, they just committed a crime. So it's like, just what is your baseline? What is your baseline of understanding of reality? And then from there, it can go a lot of different ways.
That's the degrees that we're off chart.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, Amanda, I think you get credit for finding these two articles, both from the New York Times, but taking slightly different tacks as we talk about nautical navigation. The first is Us and Them is All the Rage. And I think that one's written by David French, who I think most people have not heard of. I mean, except like 9 years ago. I think William Crystal from, I forget what, he used to be a famous neocon, but he gets mentioned a
Yeah,
lot.
Bill Crystal. Yeah.
Yeah, but he became a never Trumper, and I think in 2016 he recommended David French to be the never Trump candidate in 2016 to try to like wrestle back the nomination from Trump or something like that.
Really?
And everyone was like, who the fuck is David French? So that didn't go well. Just another in a long line of failures from Bill Crystal. And then the other one, similar, What Our Broken Politics Owe to the Nazi Jurist Carl Schmitt. And both of these articles talk about Carl Schmitt, so we're just going to sort of mush them together and talk about different elements as we see fit. So, funnily enough, one of these articles, I'm not sure which, says, what we've been witnessing in the last decade is millions of Americans constructing a different moral superstructure. Okay, now I remember. This is David French speaking. So for context, this is a never Trumper making this case. And he continues, a good way to understand this terrible political morality is to read Carl Schmitt, a German political theorist who joined the Nazi Party after Hitler became chancellor. The political sphere, according to Schmitt, is distinct from the personal sphere, and it has its own distinct contrasts. He writes, quote, let us assume that in the realm of morality, the final distinctions are between good and evil. In aesthetics, beautiful and ugly. In economics, profitable and unprofitable. Politics, however, has its own ultimate distinctions. In that realm, the specific political distinction to which political actions and motives can be reduced is that between friend and enemy. End quote. And it took me a few readings of this to come to this thought, which is that might actually be a good and clear distillation of the conservative worldview. Now, of course, he presents it as universal and standard, and this is just what everyone needs to understand is really happening. And I'm going to disagree with that. But as a window into the conservative mind and how they see politics, that makes a lot of things start to make sense. The flip side of that coin that the left generally talks about is like, we have a wider spectrum of empathy. We have a bigger idea of the concept of friend or the concept of us. Like, what group size are we talking about? Like, a conservative is more likely to talk about us as in like their family and friends. And someone on the left is going to be more like all of humanity, all of living creatures, like we're
Mhm.
quite expansive in our thinking. And so the whole like friend and enemy dichotomy is just like, why do you want to put someone in a box? I don't need you to be my enemy. You can be different from me and not be my enemy. That's cool.
It's the binary of it all. Like even like as he's describing it, I wish you could hear it. Like he's describing like there's just two ways of being. Like I don't think David French is my friend or my enemy, but right now he's kind of on my side in this situation, so he's useful and I think it's worth having a discussion about what he's writing. However, it's not one or the other. I think in other issues that we would be completely opposed. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And I think that is very difficult for maybe just the conservative mind because it seems to be different than the left wing kind of like there's just more of a everything has to be black and white, ironically or not ironically,
I was about to
and
say.
everything has to be good or bad, moral or like,
Mhm.
and there's no room for shades of gray. And I think this show, like that's constantly, we're constantly worried about nuance and
Mm.
how important this aspect of that is and that aspect of this. Like they just don't have room for it. And I don't know if it's a lack of capacity, way they were raised. Who knows what the reason is, but it does seem like the conservative mindset is just wired for A and B, black and white, good and bad, and that's it.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, there's a point that I feel like I should remind people of more often is, ultimately, humanity really can be split into two groups. There are those who think that humanity can be split into two groups, and those who think that people contain multitudes and are complicated enough that it is ridiculous to try to divide everyone into two groups.
I mean,
But man, do they try.
oh boy. Well, I mean, and that's it, right? It is seeking a simplistic answer that they imagine will make everything good. They don't really want to have the detailed, complicated conversation. And we have watched this all firsthand in our lifetimes. The angrier people get about their situations, the more they want the simplistic answer. And we know this from history. And so we're watching it happen right now. But what I think, and Jay alluded to this in the beginning, but just to really put a fine point on it, Carl Schmitt was basically, his job was to justify the horrors that Hitler wanted to commit. His entire viewpoint or theories were skewed because he had to make these atrocities fit into a nice, neat little box that people were like, yeah, that's just the way humans are. So, like, it's fine. And so, what he actually did, in my view, and I'm sure others have said this, is he just identified a social vulnerability, which is ripe to exploit by anybody who wants power. But it's not necessarily a theory that is based in some inherent truth about humans. Like, yeah, humans fight and we've had wars and we've done all of this, but it doesn't inherently mean that we need to be in a peaceful society in and out groups and othering people and enemy and friend. It's just that people in power have identified this as an easy way to divide people who have much more in common with each other than they ever will with somebody in power.
I remember when I was going through school in like specifically psychology, there's a branch of it that's in like it's political psychology. And that freaked me out because I already feel like people can be manipulated. Like we're talking about people in a complex way, and there's definitely complexities, but like what Amanda's pinpointing, like, yeah, fear. You can manipulate situations to make people afraid. And then we go into biological functions that make perfect sense when you're considering survival. But the disconnect is that a lot of those things that would drive us naturally into those states are manufactured.
Mhm.
So, like, yes, we have enough resources that everyone can live a fine life. We just manufacture a situation where that's not the case. So then you have fights of scarcity and all these other things that come about. But yeah, they're just exploited. I don't think that it says as much about people as they want you to think.
Mhm.
I just believe that conservatives have bought into the idea that this is humanity,
Yeah.
not a manufactured situation.
Yeah, you're right. So there's the nature of humanity, and I mean, one of the primary things they lean on is that because people can't get along, they shouldn't have to try or something. And I guess they would argue that it's not just that people can't get along, it's that like different people who come from different areas of the world or have different skin colors or whatever can't be expected to ever get along or coexist. So, skipping away from David French into the other article, they talk about Schmitt's desire for a homogeneous society, which is just like the softest way of advocating for
Yeah.
genocide in the world.
Right.
And it says, a real democracy requires, now quoting Schmitt, elimination or eradication of heterogeneity, just a fancy word for diversity. And continuing, it says, then it could dispense with liberalism with all of its onerous rules and procedures, which only serve to thwart a homogeneous people's will. End quote. I was like, homogeneous people's will. Does he really think such a thing exists? Has he ever met a group of people who
Right.
were like pretty similar in a lot of ways and didn't have a ton of disagreements? Because that's like, if you want to get down to the nature of humanity, it is more understandable that we are always going to have disagreements. People are always going to find a way to create, no matter how small and no matter like based on what tiny insignificant elements, like in groups and out groups. So the answer to be purge an entire society to the point where there's a homogeneous people so that their collective will can be accurately expressed through dictatorship is absurd, because there is no such thing. It is much more understandable to think like, well, okay, so like no matter how diverse or how homogeneous a society is, there's always going to be disagreements. And so I guess we need a political system to help us deal with disagreements.
When you think about it for like just half a second, this ideology is childish at best.
Mhm.
Children think this way. I can only have like, and anything different makes me uncomfortable. Like the people that are in power right now completely go by this. Either, maybe Trump doesn't believe any of it. I think it said in the article, like Trump clearly had never heard of Carl Schmitt when he's doing all the things that Carl Schmitt would approve of. But Stephen Miller has. And Stephen Miller's buddy, what was his name? Richard Spencer in college. They both went to Duke. They both clearly follow this ideology. Like I've read some stuff about what Richard Spencer wants when he's advocating for a white ethno state in America. What he wants and why he wants it is so that people can feel safe with their family and friends. And they met in, I think, a European studies class. And apparently he didn't study European history at all, because they found a way to find some divisions in Europe before whiteness. It seemed like Germans maybe didn't like, I don't know, anybody south of Germany for a while. French didn't really like the British very much for a long time. People find a way to find the differences. And right now we're in this like silly, childish version of like skin color is the main difference that exists in America. And once we get rid of all the brown people in their minds, then everything will be fine. Of course it won't. Obviously it won't. But they haven't thought that far, because right now they're in the anger, fear, get rid of all the undesirables. But the people that go along with this, that will then become the undesirables, I hope one day that there's just some way to get them to see that you're next. And like that's what fascism always does.
Yeah.
There's a next bad thing. And if it was all just white people, then obviously it's women. Like women are always on the table of this, but it will be women, it will be poor people, it will be people who didn't go to the right church. There's always some division. There will never be a pure enough way to make these people feel safe. That's what always is going to ruin it for them. They're never going to win because it's not real. But I wish we didn't have to go through all the shit that we're getting ready to go through because they can't realize it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I realized that, like the note I wrote, you sort of took some of the words out of my mouth, but I realized like this is a destructive philosophy born from the fear of uncertainty and a desire for unattainable comfort that only faith can provide. I was like, that is where these people are coming from. We haven't gotten to the point yet where Schmitt conflates his idea of a deity with his conception of how a country should be run. That he's like, well, if God
Yeah.
is all powerful and that's the ultimate authority,
that-
and the entire idea of truth stems from this supernatural authority, and that's working really well, he imagines. And he's like, well, then we should just
Yeah.
do the same thing here on Earth with our nations. So the Führer just needs to be the ultimate authority from which everything flows, including the idea of truth. And was like, let me introduce you to my friend Ralph. Like, you have more in common than you realize, because when you start with that many faulty premises, it's understandable how you get things so wrong. And what links it is they're like, well, I find a lot of comfort in faith. So if, it's like the idea that this ability to find comfort exists, right? I don't have that. I've never been faithful in the religious sense. And so like I'm just like comfortable with, hey, like shit's weird, like you don't know how things are going to go. Things are a little uncertain. That's okay. That's normal. And they're like, no, it has to be certain. I have to be comfortable. I
Mhm.
have to be protected. How can I do that? And then you go down the path that Deon just described. They're like, well, let's get rid of all the people who make me uncomfortable and see how I feel then. And if I still feel uncomfortable, we'll find more people to get rid of.
I know I've said it before, and I don't want to oversimplify, but this is exactly what happens when you don't have social emotional intelligence. Like I have to think we have a little bit more social emotional intelligence. And like, of course it's not baked into our school systems because it wouldn't benefit, anyone to have a group of people who can see things clearly, advocate for themselves, and don't fall to boogeymen. Because you know, my wife was asking me questions about why are people like this? Like, why would they accept this answer? And I was like, well, you're afraid. Someone points to the answer, and the answer is something you can fix. It's within control. And they make you believe that it's within control. If we just do this one thing, then like you're not going to feel that fear. We can take control of this and you're going to feel better. But that's never the answer.
It's power. It's just degrees, right?
Mhm.
So to psychoanalyze the entire population is always fun. And like, I agree with you that like there are threads here that we are now, because people are talking more than ever about, like psychology and trauma and like what it does to people. I mean, look at Schmitt, for God's sakes. He was apparently like a very, I would say, creepy kind of Catholic, and got excommunicated from the church because he didn't annul his first marriage before getting married again, and had some sort of issues when it came to, let's call it, fatherly figures, right? Like, I don't know his whole backstory, but it's very clear just from some of the things they mentioned that he is searching for an answer, a leader, someone to tell him it's going to be okay. And he
A
thinks
daddy.
everyone else must think exactly like me and need the father figure to tell them what to do.
And not all of us do. Like,
Right.
not all of us
do.
want or
Not all
need
of us
that.
have the deep kind of trauma that a lot of people do. And look, God, we say it over and over again on this show. Like, we would not have people like King Leopold, Hitler, Trump, etc. in our world if we had like healthy family dynamics and like emphasized care and love and empathy, right? So we churn these people into what they are. then they take advantage of other people's trauma and say, you're like me, you want what I want. And suddenly you have a movement that turns into genocide. And it's scary as fuck, you know? I mean, it's like too easy, unfortunately.
Yeah. It's a deep cut, but this has just been sitting on my soundboard for months. You know what these guys needed to hear?
Hey, birdie.
Yes.
I'm gonna take care of you, birdie. Okay?
Okay, but that is so real. And like, I get it. Like when we talk about things like that, I think instantly there's like an eye roll that happens. But like,
Yeah.
because we're trained to not want that gentleness and to
Mhm.
like self-preserve, and like, yeah, our society is not healthy. And hearing things like that brings about an uncomfortability because we all did need to be treated like that. But you can't say that or you're soft.
I just watched a supercut of Republican Congress people and right-wing talking heads saying "Daddy's home, Daddy's
Yes,
home," talking
yes.
about Trump,
Mhm.
and that's what all this like. They just want to be safe. They want to
Yeah.
feel safe. The world is scary. They should stop watching the shows that they make. They would be less scary for sure. They make it
Right.
way scarier. That's it.
Absolutely.
All right, I have an experiment. I'm going to play a game that I just learned about. I have no idea how this is going to go. I know how it's supposed to go, but we're going to see how it goes. I'm going to play a song without the melody. I'm going to tap a song on a piece of plastic. So you'll be able to hear it. And the game is, can you tell what song I'm playing? And it's going to be a super simple one, like one that you would have grown up hearing a million times. Ready?
What? Deon, you're not Amanda?
Deon's a
It
no.
sounds familiar, but I can't pull it.
Amanda can't
I'd
pull
have
it.
to
Am
hear
I
it
making
again.
it up? Is it happy birthday?
Erin is correct. It's happy birthday.
There you go.
I realized as I was starting to sing it or go along, Deon was shaking his head no. And I was like, oh, don't give it away. Like, clearly.
All right, let's try another one.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Got nothing.
Erin,
Happy birthday.
you're our last you're our last hope.
I don't have the words.
That was row, row, row your boat.
Oh.
Oh, I think we needed a higher pitch.
Well, that's exactly the point.
Yeah, okay.
All right, last one, just for fun.
Now I can only hear row, row, row your boat. What was it?
Anyone? Nothing.
Nothing.
Old McDonald.
Okay.
So I got that game from Alan Alda, who wrote the book, If I Understood You, Would I Have This Look on My Face? And they like
That's a great title.
It really
yeah.
is.
So that is a test that I think they have done it scientifically. He's also done it with like crowds, you know, like on a stage. And when you ask people, what percentage of people do you think will be able to guess the song? People generally guess in the like 50% range. Yeah, like not everyone's going to get it, but a lot of people will get it. And the actual number of people who get it is closer to 2%. And the problem is that when you, in your own head, and the parallel is with communicating an idea versus communicating a song, when you tap the song, you have the melody in your own head.
Mhm.
And it is a cognitive bias of ours to like not just assume, but to find it very hard to believe that other people can't know the same thing that you know. Because if you try to tap, like, try this on your own time. Try tapping a song and not playing the melody in your own head. You can't do it. You hear it so clearly. It comes through whether you want it to or not. And so the idea, like this whole book about communication and scientists trying to communicate their ideas to the general public, is like scientists struggle so much because they have so much specialized information and jargon and everything that comes with their job in their head, that they're like, well, I mean, people have to know some of this, right? And like, no, they don't. People don't know what you're talking about. They don't have any of your background information. And it is the equivalent of trying to convey a song to someone by tapping without including the melody. And so Alan Alda's point is like, you have to fill in the melody or people will not understand you. And so I took that lesson, and it's very interesting and all of that. But I took it for our conversation and thought about how people like JD Vance fall into this trap almost in the reverse, where it's like the assumption of what other people have in their head is like, no, dude, that's just in your head. you're tapping that song and no one knows what you're talking about. So at the beginning of one of these articles, it says, in an interview last month, this is from a while ago, in an interview last month with the New York Times opinion columnist Ross Douthat, J.D. Vance, the Republican senator from Ohio who is vying to be Donald Trump's running mate, declared, quote, "The thing I kept thinking about liberalism in 2019 and 2020 is that these guys have all read Carl Schmitt. There's no law, there's just power, and the goal here is to get back in power."
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude,
There's a melody in his head.
there's a
that's for
melody in
sure.
your head and no one else knows what you're talking about. Like, he can't imagine that people on the left have no idea what he's talking about. And we've talked about this before. I think on this show is like, we can barely imagine what it's like to be an uninformed voter, right?
Mhm.
Like, I have a better idea of what it's like to be a conservative and to have a conservative mindset than to be completely uninformed and like going through life not paying attention. Like, I can't hear that melody. That is nowhere near my experience. I haven't, read enough
Yep.
about it. There probably hasn't been enough written about it, because who would write that book? So this like breakdown in communication, from what I can glean reading between the lines and like watching what people like JD Vance advocate for, is they think that the left are fascists. And that is a huge part of how they justify their own actions, because they have built up their political opposition into the biggest, scariest boogeyman like in the history of American politics right now.
Mhm. Mhm.
And they're completely wrong because they're kind of dumb.
I mean, to state the obvious, I was venting about this the other day. This isn't something anyone here doesn't know. It's just like sometimes I need to yell about it. I'm like, who are the ones banning books? Who are the ones telling people they can't go to the bathroom? Who are the ones trying to change the curriculum to teach alternate history? Like, I am so fucking tired of the fact that they have won the narrative on this, loosely speaking. Like, they won enough people on the narrative that the left is the thing that they are. It's infuriating, but it's also just like astounding at how easily people are willing to accept that narrative despite all of the evidence before them.
So I went two places with that JD Vance quote. I went instantly like, oh, self-report, you're a Nazi.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then
Who knows about Carl Schmitt?
Yeah,
Oh, you
like,
do.
like,
You know
yeah,
about
like,
Carl
what-
Schmitt.
like without the context of this conversation and the other articles, I don't know who Carl Schmitt is.
Mhm.
I'm not that deep into the inner workings of the Nazi party, but he was.
Yep.
But also, so I went to the place where I was like, okay, so is this like a dog whistle, just letting other Nazis know, like I'm one of I'm one of you? But it's probably more they do think they're good. I have a hard time with it. They do all this awful stuff. They're clearly advocating for bad things. They think they're right. They think they're doing good things. They think they're on the side of good versus evil. And we're evil. And it's hard for me to think that. It's hard because I don't think of things in that good versus evil kind of way. But this is what they're doing. Like, they think they're good. It's everything they do is in the service of good. So even the things that we think are clearly bad, and they probably have a little like twinge of like, this isn't, maybe it's uncomfortable, but it's for the greater good. That's what they're doing. And that's hard. That's a hard one to accept, that we're never going to be able to convince JD Vance that, hey man, you're a Nazi now. Like, Nazis are bad. You're one of the Nazis, but that's not what they think.
No.
I mean, in the way that Amanda has to yell about like book bans and whatever, like it is so hard to imagine that they're genuine because what they're saying is so easily provably false that that it's hard to imagine. Like, how do you really believe that the left are the ones who are cutthroat, power hungry maniacs? Like, they get taught that the left is evil and power hungry and all that. And so they respond in kind from their own perspective. They're like, well, we have to be cutthroat. We have to get all the power. We have to, bend or break whatever rules necessary. The flip side of that is that liberals are watching all of this happen. We've been watching the Republican Party become an authoritarian entity over the last, like, not just decade, but I mean, it's accelerated. But I mean, they were like in a weird cult under George W. Bush. The whole
Yeah.
like, you're with us or against us sort of thing is the same framing, right? Like, we've been watching people become authoritarians and like letting that be the forefront of the conservative movement for decades. And the left has responded by like barely being able to muster a desire for power.
Right.
Like, we still have so much resistance to power. Like, we're skeptical of power. We don't really like people having that much power. And then that reflects on ourselves. And we're like, I mean, people shouldn't have that much power. Like, I'm not going to go try to get power because like corrupt people have power. I don't want to be corrupt. I don't want to have power. and they, in the mirror world, see us and they're like, evil, demonic, power hungry maniacs. We have to stop them.
Yeah.
And, some of them are cynical and they know they're lying, and a lot of them aren't. And they think, yep, I can see it clearly. And yeah, they're living in a different universe.
I mean, the article by David French sort of, at the end kind of did the mild both sides bullshit of like, I've seen people on the left, demonize. And my immediate reaction was like, no. You've misunderstood what you've seen. The left is reacting to the other side wanting to commit violence against people. That's not demonization like what is happening on the right. They are trying to resist an assault. Please don't give me that bullshit of like, you're just as bad as the other side. That's playing right into the hands of their total manipulation of reality.
At like the deepest level, we fundamentally disagree with their ideology. Like, that is our whatever to conservatives. It has nothing to do with them as people. It has nothing to do with like something that they can't change. Like, it literally has to do with their ideology. And then on the flip side, yeah, they demonize people for where they're born, who they're born to, and like things that they can't inherently change about themselves. I don't know what to do with that. Like, I feel like that's a pretty heavy divide.
Yeah. And I mean, now that we're I don't know, we're at a weird stage right now. Like, we're clearly, more and more people seem to be willing to just accept the lies at this point. And that is terrifying. Like, every time I look at a poll, I'm like, well, things should have dramatically changed by now. Nope, nothing's changed. Like really minor movements. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And I think it is. It's the reason the Nazis gained power and were able to do what they did, because people eventually were like, I don't know, maybe that's fine. Like, because fighting it is too hard, or it seems like the tide has come, so why push back, and I'm not saying people on the left are fighting back, but there are a lot of people who are kind of, swaying in the breeze, who are going to be like, yeah, sure, let's do that, why not, and again, Carl Schmitt's entire job was to make horrific things seem palatable, that the Nazis did, right? So the Night of Long Knives, a murderous event in 1934, purging his rivals, right? Schmitt called that the highest justice. And the title of what he wrote about the death squads and that whole event was "The Fuhrer Protects the Law." To me, that instantly sounded very, very similar to what I just heard J.D. Vance come out with, tweeting in defense of Trump being able to do whatever he wants and run ramshackle over the courts, right? That might as well have been the title of his frickin' tweet. Like, the Justice Department has no authority over the executive branch. Full stop.
Yeah.
And then Trump saying, not long after that, he who saves his country does not violate any laws. We have been here before. And the tactics are the same. And it doesn't even, Nazi is like an inflammatory word in some ways, but like, and so I don't know, maybe we do need to be more specific, although nobody's listening anyway. Not to us, but in general. The playbook is always the same. It's not just the same playbook for the Nazis. It's the same playbook for anybody in power trying to divide and literally conquer. These are the tactics they use. Call them a Nazi, call them a Soviet era, Lenin, Stalin, whatever. Like, these are the tactics. How have we, this happened so many times just in the last century. How are we not aware enough and awake enough? I mean, education. I could give you all the answers if you want. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole.
And also, shouldn't it be clear the people that you're talking about that end up going along with things? It is very clear, as I was saying, and like probably not as articulate as I wanted to, but the threat to us is our lives. The threat to them is you shouldn't be in power. Like, you should probably have a normal job where you interact with people who are diverse, because clearly your ideology has gone off rails. You need to immerse more. We're not going to put you in power, but death isn't ever on the table. In our circles, at least, progressives, true progressives, I don't ever hear that level of threat.
Mm-hmm. And then I have one more little comparison here, because actually this is more of a divide in a way that I didn't expect. So Vance is over in Europe saying horrific shit, building up far-right parties, chastising and like scolding, European left and right mainstream parties in a way that he does not have the authority or like any sort of standing to do. And in one of these articles, they kind of briefly get into like, why did actually, this might not be from this article. I think I pulled this from something else. Apologies. They were talking about why is the AfD party in Germany like so bad, right? And why does even the conservative party in Germany like not want to touch it with a 10-foot pole? And it's because they have advocated for nothing less than a 180-degree turnaround in the politics of remembrance. Like, they specifically don't want Germany to have this politics of remembrance to talk about their history and what they did to the world and Jewish people. In 2018, their party leader dismissed Hitler and the Nazis as just a speck of bird shit in over 1,000 years of successful German history. So they're not necessarily just saying like, we want to return to that. They're saying like, can we just forget about that? Meanwhile, J.D. Vance is out there being like, no. This is the playbook. This is what we want to do. Like, following in the fucking footsteps of Nazis and the people that justified what they did.
Well,
so there's actually a difference there in some regard. I mean, you can say whether or not the AfD is, if you can take them at face value or not. That's a whole other story. But
well, my question is actually about timing. Who's following in whose footsteps? I mean, Hitler.
Well, the Nazis were inspired by U.S. Jim Crow. Yeah, I mean,
exactly. And
absolutely.
I don't know if the AFD was advocating for, erasure of remembrance before or after, the conservatives in the US started talking about erasing critical Holocaust theory. Like, it's all the same shit.
Yeah.
Like, do not
After.
remember anything bad we ever did. And
Yeah.
that's how we will govern going forward.
Yeah, no, AFD is pretty new. That's probably inspired by the right-wing shift and an effort to go global in their ideology.
Jay, you just made me feel better though, because one of my anxiety points through all of this and watching on a global scale has been that Germany used to be the example of what America should have done to rectify
Yep.
after the Civil
Mhm.
War.
Mhm.
And the fact that they've now fallen is a great concern, but making that connection that that's not uninfluenced by what also is going on and has taken place over here.
They haven't
Since
fallen yet. Let's just I don't
Yeah,
want to defeat them before they've gotten
no, I
there.
think, and it has to do with us having a German friend who, yeah, she's watching people that she loved, support this party
Mhm.
and not understanding how, because in her family, the storyline is so, connected, so raw still that it's shared, passed on. The remembrance piece is very heavy,
Mhm.
but not all families.
I think we had it in one of the episodes recently. George Manabo, is that his name? Economist. He's British economist with Double Down News. And he was talking about how right now we're in kind of like an aberration because throughout human history, there's always these small groups of people that have power. And I think that's the dynamic at all times. Like what we were talking about with the power dynamic, like JD Vance talking about this is about power and we need power and the left is just out for power. No, we're not. Most people aren't. A vast majority of people
Yep.
are not out for power. It's always a small group of people, and they're willing to kill for it. And we're not. And Bill Burr had a long spiel about this as a joke, like, we don't want to kill. He said we probably should kill these people, but we don't want to. But meanwhile, they do, and that's kind of what this is about. Germany is a great example of what they should have done afterwards, but they're backsliding because the same types of people do want power. They do
Mhm.
want control. They're still scared. And to infantilize them just a little bit more, just on a personal parenting level. Yesterday, my daughter got caught watching YouTube. We're not watching YouTube. It's not a thing she's allowed to do. And she started to get mad and she's freaking out. And got her to calm down and apologize and accept responsibility for her behavior. And that was the trick, and everything was smoothed out. She apologized and it was great, and we could move forward. That's what they don't want to do. They don't want to apologize, accept responsibility for things that happened that they're not personally responsible for, except for the racism of it all, that the white race did this, so I did this kind of thing. Maybe separate yourself from the racism because you're not responsible for what all white people did. Racist person, don't be racist. Not all races are responsible for everything that the other race does. But we can acknowledge the things that happened in the past that were wrong. We can make amends for the things that happened that were wrong and have affected the present. We can do that and then move forward. They don't want to, because that shit is hard. Taking responsibility and being an adult and saying, I messed up, is hard. It takes a level of development that they're not at yet.
Yeah.
They need to accept responsibility for being wrong. And that's why, when JD Vance talks about Carl Schmitt and puts it on everybody else, like, bro, in college, you were studying Nazis. That was wrong. You know it was wrong. But now you've put it out on everybody else. Everybody else is clearly doing the same thing. No, you did. Make amends for it, apologize, and then we can move forward. But man, how far are we from that right now?
I don't know, Deon. You might be the next daddy. I'm just saying.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
I walked away and I was like, you are right. I need to take responsibility when I do something.
Daddy's home indeed.
Oh God.
Oh, that makes me feel so gross.
I was just going to say, and Jay, you've probably said this on the show before, but what Deon said was just bringing it back to me about the analogy of you buy a house, but it needs repairs.
This came from the book Cast. And it's my favorite metaphor from the
Yeah.
book Cast, written by the author who I'm forgetting at the moment.
Isabella Wilkerts.
Yes, that sounds right. And yes, it's the idea of a house that you've inherited that has a faulty foundation. You did not cause the foundation to be faulty, but you now own the house. It is your job to retrofit that house or it will collapse. So it takes the personal blame away while like very solidly instilling the idea of responsibility that still exists now. Yeah, something happened in the past. You didn't do it, but it is your job to deal with it now.
God, can you imagine a political system where people take responsibility in that way?
Yeah.
Like I just thought of like, can we imagine a president getting up there using that metaphor and like, yeah, owning the foundation that they weren't alive for and like taking responsibility and trying to correct course. Like I can't even
I mean,
imagine our political system
I
working.
think Jimmy Carter was the closest we
Yeah.
had.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
closest was
And he still racism wasn't
Oh,
dealt with in the
yeah.
right way over there.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure the last two Democratic presidents did apologize for some systemic things. I'd have to go back and check facts.
Yeah.
I think Obama apologized for slavery. Am I remembering that right?
He went on an apology tour. I
Yeah.
know
So
that.
there was the bullshit apology tour that didn't really exist,
Yeah.
but there were like official proclamations of it was wrong that the United States
Yeah.
government did X. So Obama may or may not have apologized for slavery. I think he apologized for something. Biden, I'm pretty sure, apologized for indigenous residential schools. So like we're kind of doing it. They're making a little progress, but you know, it's not that big of a deal. It doesn't get talked about a lot. It's like it gets treated like those blip proclamations that no one really pays attention to, but you know, very slight progress.
Not to downplay that, but we do still have like, Christopher Columbus Day and we still
Yeah, of course.
Oh, we're still steeped. We're steeped so deep.
Yeah.
It's, you know.
I was like, I appreciate them recognizing the residential schools, but I'm like, yeah, there's a lot more apology that goes with indigenous people than
Yeah, I
just
mean,
the
look at
schooling
Australia.
part.
They've in Canada. They've been apologizing longer than us. Have they made real structural change? Like very minimally. I mean, more than us probably, but we're not close. We know how we actually can atone for those sins, but no one is willing to take those steps. So
I'm looking at a Smithsonian article about times the United States has apologized for things. Internment of Japanese citizens during World War II. I think Reagan apologized for that. The Tuskegee experiment, I don't see when or who that apology was made through. And apology for slavery and Jim Crow laws did happen for sure. For some reason, they're not highlighting who did that. And the overthrow of the Hawaiian kingdom. I know that was Clinton because I did research on that a while back.
Hmm.
And maybe this is old enough. Yeah, this was written in 2016, so they don't have the updated one about the residential schools. So yeah, like the government does that stuff kind of, but I guess what we need more is like more than proclamations is can we put that in our curriculum or something? Because
Yeah.
I didn't get taught about any of those things for sure.
And that's the difference, like with Germany. That's what they're mad about because that is exactly what they did in Germany.
Yep.
They
Yeah.
put it in the curriculum.
Yeah.
It is required. I've listened to recently. I don't know what's going on in South Africa, like exactly. I can't speak broadly about it, but I know that the Afrikanist parties, they're kind of rising up, and there are people who are pushing back and saying that no, like we should not be in control. We did some damage over the course of years, and there is pushback because there's some curriculum. There's some people that have a shared base of knowledge of history, and I think that's the real issue that we have right now is this lack of a shared base of history. We do not live in the same reality. Like we just don't.
And we don't just not live in the same reality. There's like active opposition. Like I was just quickly trying to look up some of those Obama apologies. And what I found is a Heritage Foundation article, Barack Obama's top 10 apologies, how the president has humiliated a superpower. So, like.
But think about the framing of that, right? Like apologizing is
Weak.
Weak.
is weak.
Yeah.
It is humiliating. That's what they think. It's weakness to admit that you're not omnipotent, that we're not
Yeah.
perfect, that you made mistakes. And that is the ultimate weakness. Like that,
You have to degrade
It's-
yourself.
it's an ideology full of just the weakest,
Mhm.
most childish thinking possible.
Scared people.
Yeah. Masquerading as strength.
And we probably don't have time to get fully into this last article. It's the fascism, stupid, from the Reframe. They get into the weakness of the Democrats, basically arguing like, nah, we're going to go ahead and treat this as normal and just see how things go. But I did want to highlight this one because, boy, it is a hell of a metaphor. And not just the people like J.D. Vance and sort of those in power seeking this style of politics, but also those who support them. This came up earlier, and I was like, oh yeah, this I want to make sure we highlight this metaphor to describe those who are like in support and like maybe full throated, maybe not, maybe they're just like, that's probably okay. So this writer says, I know who is in the market for the American Nazi Party / the American Corruption Party. It's the people who are deeply excited about the harm that's coming because they've been assured those they hate will be harmed first and worst. It's those who notice that they are favorably positioned next to the blood chute and assume the fascist billionaire slaughter of everyone else is going to deliver enough runoff that they'll get to feed too. It's
Yeah.
like, oh
The
yeah,
blood chute.
we are getting serious with our metaphors now.
That is so much better than trickle down economics. So much better. The Reframe, his name is A.R. Moxon. He is a fantastic writer. Go read his stuff.
Yeah. I mean, originally trickle-down economics was horse and sparrow economics, which I always love to remind people of, because the idea is if you feed horses more and more oats, then they will shit out more of that, which the sparrows can then feast on, which I call horseshit economics, obviously. So they rebranded to trickle-down, which has worked, reasonably well for a long time. But yeah, blood chute runoff economics is definitely where we're headed.
But we're seeing some of this happen already, and it will get worse. But like the farmers who are now up in arms, the farmers who voted for Trump, even though we screwed them the last time and they didn't learn anything, are now really upset that they lost all this money because USAID food shipments are not going out and tariffs and whatnot. And like they're starting to pop up on social media saying like, I regret what I did. Well, okay. And there's a whole conversation about, fuck around and find out and all of that. But the reality is, that they made a choice, they made a calculation, not based on reality, but what they hoped would be reality. They just assume, because many of them are white privileged men, that they will be shielded, that Trump works for them. Nothing he does will harm them. Only the people they want to be harmed would be harmed. And then suddenly, when that is not the case, they're out there stunned. I mean, it's sad. It's kind of pathetic. Like, I don't know how you get to that point.
Racism.
Well,
That's what
yes.
that's like the farmers are a natural coalition for progressives. They live off the land. They have to work together. They have to work with other people. It is a communal job. As much as like machines have made it less so, it's still a very communal job. Like living off the land, that kind of idea. Not necessarily like the way it used to be. It's more modern now, but they are a natural progressive coalition. But racism pushed them completely to the opposite side of their interest. They have no interest with the corporate run fascist party. That is not where they should be, other than racism. That's it. And racism has been used as a tool to just make people, white people, vote for the wrong thing over and over and over again. And they think they're going to be right by the trough to feed, but they're not. They're going to be in the trough, just like the rest of us.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's why I like the metaphor from the article so much, because as we've continued to have conversations about true violence and dissecting that word, how it's utilized, but also the ways in which we don't categorize violence traditionally, but definitely would fall under that. And I think that's part of it. Like, once these billionaires ransack the government, there is a violence that comes with how people are going to have to survive. These farmers are going to be put into situations where some of them might lose their land, or there's an economic impact that could be pretty severe depending on where you are, in the ladder. I would categorize as like violence, but on the conservative side, like, would never ever think that the state is, doing violence on them. The way that they see the boogeyman, it's like, yeah, you're gonna physically come onto my land, commandeer it for whatever progressive
Right.
commune you're gonna place there. Instead of like, oh no, this government is doing policies that are gonna leave me in a position where I either have to find a new profession and sell my land, or I'm going to be driven to the bottom where I'm like surviving bare minimum just to make things meet. So like, yeah, that would be the violence that they should be afraid of.
Yeah. And of course, how they try to soothe everyone is by saying, like, look, this is going to hurt. This is going to hurt, but it's going to be really great in the end. And so they've really hammered that message. I think Elon was one of the first ones to really emphasize that. And I've seen people toe that line and be like, this is just how it's going to be for a while, but everything's going to be great later. I mean, that's a fascinating psychological manipulation. Like,
a billionaire telling you that it might hurt. Yeah.
I
like,
heard a little
yeah.
bit. I thought when that first came out, I thought, no way. No one's going to. But of course they did. Of course they did.
No pain, no gain. We'll get there.
Pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
And the psychology goes so deep. I've been reading a couple of books on mis and disinformation and fact checking and that sort of thing. And one of the anecdotes in one of these books was about a retiree couple. They were literally some of the plaintiffs in the class action lawsuit against Trump University. They had been bilked out of $30,000 that they had given because they had been sold the idea that, like, hey, you're getting older, you need some business skills, you got to invest right, or you're going to end up as a greeter at Walmart, and you don't want that. And so these people are like, yeah, you're right, I don't want that. So I'll give Donald Trump and his university $30,000 so that they can teach me how to invest in real estate or whatever. And they're like, oh, so like it was bullshit. There was nothing there. They sold and sold and sold, and then there was like nothing behind the curtain. So there was a multi-year successful class action lawsuit against Trump University. They probably got about 90% of their tuition, put that in air quotes, tuition fees back. And then they voted for Trump in 2016. And so the writer of this book, I think it was Bill Adair from, I think, PolitiFact, talked with these people and asked, like, so, but like, you saw his scam up close. You got scammed by him. He took your money and didn't give you anything in return. So why would you be supporting him for president? And they said, well, I don't really think he had much to do with Trump University. He said that he
Wow.
didn't even earn money from it, really. Like he let them use his name, but he didn't really benefit. He wrote himself checks for millions of dollars, but they believed that he didn't really earn any money from it or have anything to do with it. And so they just like wrap up that little bit of insanity with, but running for president, like, he's going to be on our side. That's it. He's going to be on our side. The idea that billionaires can trick people into thinking that they will be on the side of regular people who are, if not desperate for money, like definitely in need of it and not like able to lose a significant amount, that we're going to be on your side. And then like the cherry on top is, in the meantime, we are definitely going to make things worse, but trust us, in the long run, it'll be good for you in particular.
Yeah.
Oof.
Something I wanted to say last time that ties to what you're saying now is we talked a lot about confidence and Americans' unearned, absurd levels of confidence. Con man is confidence man.
Mm-hmm.
That is what it is. It's what it's short for. And that is, Trump is so good at the grift. He is so good at being a con man that there are people like that who got screwed and are still voting for him.
So, like, I just made this connection and like what I was talking about with violence and like the definition of it. I realized as you were saying that, Jay, like that the threat of physical violence, which is like what is utilized, right? Like migrants are dangerous because it's a physical threat to your well-being. Like is much more daunting to a conservative brain than, let's say, existential threats, such as like this could impact your livelihood, this could like impact society, it could make it harder to live in a communal area. Like that isn't as daunting. And I think if we did away with the physical threat, like these brains might adapt and realize that that existential threat is like much more real and much more impactful on their daily life. But we always have people who are going to fearmonger and use that physical violence. And that's because as humans, we're wired and we know that that physical threat of life is like very core and built into us. Like protect and preserve your life, which would again make sense if you're actually physically, being terrorized instead of it being a fantasy.
And this is why it's tough with the Trump supporters, and like what the listener response that we started with this was. Like a lot of Trump supporters, I mean, there's no other way to say it, that they are victims of abuse.
Mm-hmm.
But just because they're victims of abuse doesn't mean that they can't abuse other people. They can still be dangerous, right? But I think for the most part, that's the majority of the Trump voting base. They are being conned, they're being abused, they're being used, they're being duped. And I don't want to compare them to animals. That's not what I'm trying to do here. But like, if you see an animal in the woods that seems cute or whatever and it's hurt, don't go up and touch it. Don't go up and try to pet it because it could hurt you, even if you're trying to help. And I think that's kind of where we're at with a lot of Trump supporters right now. It's like, I want you to see like where you're at, where you really stand in this, but you're not ready to hear it. Like, they can be dangerous right now. And I don't know how to get across there. We're talking on a show called Solved, and I have no idea way to solve this. I leave it up to you three to solve this one. But like the vast majority of Trump supporters are not future members of the Nazi party wearing swastikas on their arms. They're not future Klan members about to put hoods on. They just aren't. But they are a part of the group that is. And that's, I don't know how to bridge that divide.
I feel like Deon just dropped a challenge on us, and I don't know that we're prepared to solve this one.
Yeah, I unsolved solved. I kind of fucked it up.
Tune in next week when we solve our own question.
Community action teams.
I guess the potential to solve these seemingly intractable problems, which are not actually intractable, like as much as we talk about history repeating itself and like, how do we not see this coming because it's happened so many times in the past? The other thing that has happened in the past is that countries have flipped from dictatorships to democracies as well, and culture along with it. And people have rejected the authoritarian past that their countries have gone through. So taking the long view, we can have some positive hopes for the distant future beyond the Trump era. In the meantime, I guess I will just close with, because we promised last week, I just wanted to give a little bit more information on the consumption of information. So much of where we are in the world right now is due to how people consume information, are fed faulty information. Even, I mean, we talked last week about how a January 6th rioter recognized that Facebook radicalized him and made him do all of that. And so hopefully we are slowly beginning to pivot as a society and people will begin to recognize not so good. We shouldn't go in that direction. Is there something else? Can I do this whole internet thing a different way? And so what I teased last week was that there's an article from The Verge that introduced the idea of timeline apps to me. I've been advocating over the last month or however long for RSS feeds, just like simplify, just subscribe to what you want to subscribe to, get your news through RSS feeds. And this writer, I mean, it's not an official title other than this writer wanted to call them timeline apps. And it is pulling in RSS feeds, but it's trying to be like the one app to rule them all sort of concept. So Tapestry gets mentioned prominently in this article, but the app Reader, Reeder, is highlighted as probably the one that has implemented this idea the best so far. And it's that you can get your text RSS feeds, you can put in your podcast RSS feeds, you can subscribe to a lot of the social media apps, particularly the new ones. The legacy ones, maybe not so much, but maybe some. Your YouTube channels, like everything can go in one app. You don't have to bounce around. You don't have to be at the whim of the recommendation algorithm for each one of these apps. You know, it doesn't have to be an endless scroll. You can subscribe to your favorite stuff and only your favorite stuff, and then know that the scroll's going to end. And then later that day or the next day, you can pick back up and there will be more for you. But, you know, you can scroll for a limited amount of time instead of an unlimited amount of time. Now, the hang up for a lot of these is that for the most part, they're not interactive. So if you are subscribed to creators on social media, a lot of these apps don't give you the ability to like and, you know, favorite and whatever, comment, respond directly. And so they're more passive consumption apps. There's an interesting one called Surf, which is not fully in existence yet. I signed up for their beta program and haven't been accepted yet. I think it's made by the people who did Flipboard, and they're trying to marry all of these things together. Not only can you subscribe to everything and only what you want, have it in a consolidated feed that you can organize how you want, but that it's also plugged into the federated universe of social media apps so that you actually can respond directly in line, like, comment, etc. So the future of how people may consume media looks like it has the potential of being different than how people are doing it now. And the way people do it now is awful. It's bad for your time spent, your mental health, your satisfaction. And, you know, like if you don't want people to be radicalized into overthrowing the government, we should work to rework our whole information ecosystem. So that article will be in the show notes. And if you want to read deeper on those and sort of be on the cutting edge of these apps, I mean, like at the very least for your own sake, right? Like we spent over an hour talking about fascism today. If you're feeling overwhelmed with the news, it's not like we don't get that. We're here with you too. We are having a similar experience. And so I'm excited and diving into these types of things because I too need a not overwhelming way to consume the news, understand what's going on, but then not be swept down infinite rabbit holes. So there's that, there are those, and, you know, take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll fight fascism together. Is that the answer? Community?
Yeah, that's the answer.
Community.
It always is.
Yeah. All right, excellent. If you have thoughts on defeating fascism, we would love to hear it. Let me tell you. You can send an email to j@bestoftheleft.com, or you can find us on the privacy-focused messaging app Signal at bestoftheleft.01. Thanks for listening, and remember that unfortunately, this is really happening. So continue to be decent, act like what you do and say matters, and do what matters most.